Good morning, welcome to Physics Studio. Today we're starting a 4-day little project on the pendulum and periodic motion, and you're going to be building a simple pendulum and then testing to see what factors affect its period the most. Now let's just take a quick look again at what the basic system is that we're dealing with. We know that a pendulum always needs a pivot point, and it needs some kind of string or chain, something to apply tension. And then you need a mass at the end. That pivot point has to be fixed very firmly to something. Otherwise, the mass will simply fall down. And what we want is that repetitive motion. So that's part of it. And we know that if let go, the mass will swing, right? It's constrained by that rope to swing in a circular arc, and it will come back here, and then gravity will pull it back here, and then gravity will pull it again. So we need our source of gravity down here to get it operating. And once these conditions are in place, if we let this go, it will go into a highly regular periodic motion. And that's what we're concerned with today. Now, given that this is a mass moving with some velocity through a path, we know that there are certain safety concerns we have to look at. And I wanted to talk first about that real quickly. First of all, wherever you set this up, you want to be sure that it has a clear path to swing. You don't want to set it up anywhere near a window. And it's best to find a space like a garage or a laundry room or a playroom where there aren't a lot of fragile items, right? We don't want any vases nearby, no cups and saucers and bottles, etc. So that's safety concern number one. Make sure you have a nice clear space for your pendulum to move. Okay, safety concern number two is if you have little brothers or sisters, right? Little siblings, especially 3 or 4 years old, you have to be careful because they will be curious about what you're doing, and little kids are not aware or not strongly aware of what's happening at the level of their head and eyes, right? They're typically focused on something downward. So you want to be sure if you have little brothers or sisters and they're in the area that they're watching from a safe place where they can't get into the path of the swing. And you know, with this kind of thing, these are not heavy masses, so we're talking about there may be a bruise or something, but we don't want anything like that to happen. Okay, the third thing, and I want you to think carefully about this, is we want to keep the angle at which you release your pendulum fairly low. And you remember this from being on a swing set, right? If you swing up too high, it destabilizes because you lose the tension in there. So you want to keep that angle, theta, from the vertical, under 25 degrees, and that'll keep things safe. So I think if you keep those three things in mind, you should be able to do this fairly safely. Also, be aware that this project is going to require you to attach a string or a chain or a rope to a pivot point and also to your masses, which means you may need to research knot tying or find some other means of fastening. And a couple things that are useful for that are paper clips, right? Paper clips are fairly strong but easily bendable into shapes like hooks, etc. So keep that in mind. Now, given that, what you need to do today is to find some suitable kind of mass that you can hang on the end and systematically vary, right? So that you have 1M, then you're going to want to run a trial with 2M, say, and then 3M. And you also want a suitable string or rope, and you need to find a pivot point or make a pivot point of some kind. So let's just go through and look at a couple possible examples, and you will have your own ideas. And that's part of what experimentation is about, you know, figuring out the apparatus so that it works and it controls for things. So for the string or rope, if you're inside, you're going to want to keep things light. And so some good possibilities are plain old string or twine. And each of these has advantages and disadvantages. Rough twine like this has a lot of internal friction, and so it will tend to introduce a little bit of that. Fishing line is very good, especially if you know how to tie fishing knots, you're in good shape. And then common thread from sewing both fishing line and twine have good tensile strength, but thread is fairly weak, so you'd have to keep your masses quite small, but it has the advantage of having very little friction and eliminating a lot of other variables. So thread is good. Now, if you're going to be working outside, it's possible to use linked chain, which is strong and also allows you to vary the length by hooking in at different lengths. You can also use hanging picture wire, which is very strong, but also easily bendable. Now, as far as your masses go, you're going to need something that you can increase systematically so that you can run trials testing different masses. A couple of possibilities are, you may find in your garage simple things like this, washers. You can vary those, right? 4, 8, 12, and suddenly you have very consistent variation in mass. If you're outside with a stronger setup, you can actually use books. As long as the books are the same number of pages, they're fairly easy to attach because they're square like that, but you wouldn't want to use that inside. Another possibility, and again, here are other simple things you might find in your garage that have consistent masses. Another possibility is to take like a plastic water bottle and tie it to your line, and then just successively fill it with more water. And that way you can very accurately vary the masses. So those are just some possibilities. Now, as far as the last thing we have to think about is a pivot point. So I want to take and show you just a couple possibilities. And we're going to go downstairs away from anything fragile. And so one possibility is some kind of a desktop setup. And what we have here are a simple cardboard box filled with something heavy, and then some kind of a rod, and I've weighted that to give it stability. Once I do that, I can attach something with a thread, and I have a pretty decent pendulum motion. You also might find it works better to go this way. And then I can vary the mass by hanging more of these on, and I can vary the length. Simply by taking more or less string in. Okay, now another possibility, this is just from a fireplace setup, and it's got a nice sturdy base, and these hang out. So I've affixed some washers to fishing line. And again, I get pretty steady, consistent pendulum motion with that. And again, when I want to vary the length, I'm just going to take this and I'm going to pull it up, and suddenly I have my length varied. Another possibility are chairs with a broom handle. And this is interesting, but the upholstery here actually pins it into place, so this is quite sturdy. Now, if you feel like going outside, there's a lot of possibilities there too. So let's just look real quick. Okay, one thing is, if you have a garage like this, the beams are typically exposed. And these are very, very strong and solid. And you will find, especially if you have an older house, there's often nails and hooks already in there. And so what I've set up here is with books and twine. Now, I've got plenty of space here. I have a nice steady pendulum motion. and I can add books as need be. I can detach here and pull here, and suddenly I can change the length. And looking out outside a little bit, if you have a swing set, that's a perfect setup for a little bit more larger pendulum. Also, you often find things like wind chimes and hanging planters are affixed to hooks that are often very strong. Now, you should ask your parents before you use that kind of thing, but that's often a good setup. And then you have a nice clear area for the swing to occur. So those are just a couple of possibilities for you. You'll have your own ideas. So your task for today is just to gather your materials, set them down, and comment and look at what your classmates come up with and comment on theirs as well. So have fun and be careful and safe, and I'll look forward to seeing what you come up with.